when meaning detached from reality. There was a moment when what something meant became more important than what it actually was, and that shift quietly changed how humans understood truth itself. To understand when meaning detached from reality, we must return to a time when objects, actions, and events carried meaning only through direct experience. When fire was heat, food was survival, and danger was immediate, physical, and undeniable. In this earlier world, the relationship between a thing and its significance was simple and direct. There was no gap between what something was and what it meant. The two were identical. Early humans trusted what they could see, touch, and feel. Reality was concrete. If something worked, it mattered. If it failed, it was discarded. Meaning lived inside outcomes, not interpretations. A tool was meaningful because it performed a function. A shelter was meaningful because it provided protection. Value was inseparable from utility, and utility was inseparable from direct experience. But slowly, humans began assigning meaning beyond function. A symbol came to represent value. A story explained cause. A belief defined purpose. Things began standing for more than what they physically were. This was the beginning of a separation that would grow wider over time, a gap between the thing itself and the significance humans projected onto it. A mark could mean ownership. A sound could mean authority. A symbol could mean truth. Meaning started floating free from direct experience. Humans reacted not to reality itself, but to what they believed reality represented. The response was no longer to the object or event, but to its interpretation. The same physical situation could produce entirely different reactions depending on the meaning assigned to it. This was subtle at first. A ritual felt powerful even when nothing changed. A symbol felt valuable even when it provided nothing tangible. An explanation felt true even when evidence was absent. The emotional force of meaning operated independently of the factual basis of that meaning. Humans could feel strongly about an interpretation even when the reality it referred to offered no support for that feeling. Reality had not changed. Interpretation had. And once humans began responding to meaning instead of direct experience, perception gained power over fact. That was the moment reality stopped speaking for itself, and meaning began speaking over it. As meaning drifted away from direct experience, it began reshaping behavior in ways humans barely noticed, because once interpretation mattered more than outcome, reality became negotiable. People started acting on symbols instead of situations. A sign could stop movement. A word could trigger fear. An idea could inspire sacrifice even when no physical threat existed. The behavioral response to meaning became as powerful as the behavioral response to physical reality, and in many cases more powerful, because meaning could be sustained indefinitely while physical conditions changed constantly. This allowed coordination at scale. Shared meanings unified groups that never met. Belief synchronized action across distance. Societies organized around ideas rather than immediate needs. The capacity to share meaning across space and time gave human groups a coordination mechanism that was independent of physical proximity and immediate circumstance. But this shift also introduced distortion. When meaning outweighed evidence, contradictions were ignored. Outcomes mattered less than explanations. Reality could fail without belief collapsing. A system could produce negative results for extended periods without losing the support of those who believed in its meaning. The gap between meaning and reality became a space in which error could persist uncorrected. Those who shaped meaning gained influence. Stories guided behavior. Narratives justified decisions. Control moved from physical force to interpretation. The ability to define what something meant became one of the most powerful forms of social influence, operating at a level that physical force could not reach because it shaped desire and understanding rather than merely constraining action. This created vulnerability. Meaning could be manipulated. Symbols could deceive. Fear and hope could be engineered without changing reality at all. The same detachment that allowed meaning to coordinate large groups also allowed meaning to mislead them. A symbol that represented safety could be attached to something dangerous. A narrative that explained success could justify failure. Humans began defending meanings even when evidence challenged them. Identity fused with belief. Letting go of an idea felt like losing part of self. The personal investment in meaning made revision painful in ways that went beyond intellectual disagreement. To change one's interpretation of reality felt like changing oneself. Meaning had separated from reality, and once that separation existed, truth became something to argue over rather than something to observe. As meaning continued drifting away from reality, the tension between belief and evidence began shaping conflict, identity, and power. Because once interpretation overrides experience, disagreement becomes inevitable. Groups formed around shared meanings rather than shared conditions. Symbols replaced situations as sources of unity. Loyalty shifted from what people lived through together to what they believed together. The social bonds that meaning created were powerful precisely because they transcended the limitations of direct experience. But they were also fragile because they depended on continued agreement about interpretations that could not be verified through the senses. This made society scalable, but also brittle. When meanings clashed, compromise became difficult. Reality could no longer settle arguments because each side interpreted it differently. Disputes that would have been resolved by shared experience in smaller groups became intractable when the disputants operated from different interpretive frameworks. Authority followed meaning. Those who defined narratives influenced behavior without touching the physical world. Control became symbolic rather than material. The leaders who commanded the most influence were those who could shape what events meant, not those who could change what events occurred. But this also weakened accountability. When outcomes failed, meaning absorbed the damage. Explanations protected belief. Responsibility blurred. The gap between meaning and reality provided a cushion that insulated decision-makers from the consequences of their decisions. Failure could be reinterpreted rather than acknowledged. People defended ideas more fiercely than facts because belief had become identity. To challenge meaning felt like a personal attack. The emotional intensity of disputes about meaning exceeded the intensity of disputes about facts precisely because meaning was connected to self-concept in ways that facts were not. This was the conflict at the heart of detachment. Meaning allowed humans to cooperate beyond experience, but also allowed them to ignore experience entirely. The same mechanism that enabled civilization also enabled delusion. Reality became optional. And when reality is optional, correction becomes impossible. The separation between what is and what is believed was no longer small. It was shaping the future. The climax of meaning detaching from reality was not confusion, but dominance. Because once humans acted on meaning instead of experience, those who controlled interpretation controlled behavior, regardless of what was actually happening in the world. Ideas began overriding evidence. Narratives replaced outcomes. Symbols carried more force than consequences. Reality could be ignored as long as belief remained intact. This shift reshaped civilization. Laws were followed because they meant order, not because they worked. Value existed because it was agreed upon, not because it was useful. Identity formed around stories rather than lived experience. But this power came with danger. When meaning detached too far from reality, correction disappeared. Failure could be explained away. Harm could be justified. Truth became flexible. Even today, this tension defines modern life. Images outweigh experience. Narratives outrun facts. Belief spreads faster than verification. Meaning moves faster than reality can respond. Detaching meaning from reality allowed humanity to build complex systems, shared identities, and global coordination. But it also created a world where perception can overpower truth. The challenge now is remembering what meaning was supposed to serve. Reality. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. When meaning